right. He really needs to get up to the great beyond.
That's my dog right there, that pink guy right there. Patrick Starr. You know, I took Patrick to a bar one night and he was never the same. Anyway, just kidding. See how you can turn a kid's show into an adult joke? Anyway, I'm surprised that show's still going on. Seriously, folks, I just want to talk to you, apologize for the lack of consistency with the content because I just got over a bad cold, so I'm a lot better now. You can hear it in my voice a little bit, and but we're back. Now, this episode was meaning to go up about 2 weeks ago, but somehow just a lot of stuff happened, and I decided, so it's going up this week right now, and I'm finally being able to film it. Now, the episode is going to be interesting. It's about this question that is very broad towards us. We always hear the fact, when we die, where do we go? Do we rot in the graves and we just disintegrate as souls, or do we actually go to a place? Well, that's an interesting question because this episode is about people that have died and came back and talked about their near-death experiences. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode. Now, the first case that we go into is with a celebrity by the name of Gary Busey. If you don't know who Gary Busey is, he's an awkward guy. And he's a piece of work because his humor is strange and rather funny. But he's best known for his movie role in the movie Buddy Holly, which was released in 1978, and known for playing Silver Bullet in Lethal Weapon. Now, in 1988, Gary, who was not wearing a helmet, lost control of his Harley-Davidson motorcycle while traveling on a highway in Culver City, California. Now, he hit his head on the curb with great force, which caused a massive head injury. Now, the impact resulted in a fractured skull and extensive brain damage, and Busey was rushed to Cedars Sinai Medical Center, where he underwent emergency neurosurgery to reduce the swelling in his brain. Now, while this was going on, Gary reported that he died immediately when he hit the curb, and Busey described the feeling of his spirit leaving his physical body after the accident. He experienced a sense of weightlessness and detachment as he floated above the accident scene. And of course, this is very common with people that have out-of-body experiences. They always float outside of their body. And of course, as he was having this moment of vision, it changed his life. So he recalled being drawn towards a brilliant, warm light, and the light was described as intensely bright, yet not blinding. Now, it created a feeling of unconditional love and peace, and Busey felt a magnetic pull towards this light that caused him to want to draw more closer to it, which seemed to be a portal or a gateway to another realm. Now, during his near-death experience, Busey underwent a life review, a playback of his entire life in a widescreen fashion, and he saw his past actions, thoughts, and feelings from a perspective that allowed him to understand their impact not only on himself, but on others. Now, this review was not judgmental, but rather an opportunity for deep self-reflection and learning. Now, one of the most significant aspects of Busey's near-death experience was the message he received from these angelic beings, and they conveyed to him that his time on Earth was not yet over and that he had more work to do. And this message of purpose was clear and powerful, which allowed him to create a sense of responsibility and mission for his remaining life. Now, Busey kept arguing on not wanting to go back with these beings, but the entity was insisting that he should and that it wasn't his time yet. Now, Busey described his return to his body as sudden, and the angelic beings told him that it was not time to go back. And he felt himself being pulled away from the light and the comforting presence of the angels. Now, re-entering his body was painful and disorienting as he ended up having to learn how to walk and talk again. Now, following his recovery, Busey became an advocate for motorcycle safety, stressing the importance of wearing helmets to prevent very bad head injuries. And he also speaks out about his near-death experience to various audiences, sharing the lessons he learned and encouraging others to embrace love, kindness, and the spiritual dimensions of life. Now, we move on to another incident, not involving a motorcycle accident, but a bike accident. Now, this is a story of Nancy Rhines. Now, Nancy grew up as an atheist in a Catholic family, and there was a voice in the morning during her bike ride that warned her, do not ride on the bike. But Nancy was ignoring the voice, and within a mile into her bike ride, a car comes and hits her, and Nancy flips over on the car's hood. She lands over on the pavement, and her shoulder her shoulder first, then body. All of a sudden, she's dragged underneath the vehicle another 50 to 75 feet away. Now, while this was going on, Nancy claims that she had a dual conscious experience, meaning that as she was underneath the car, she could see her body in pain, struggling to live, but also seeing the outside looking in on the whole accident scene of what was going on. Now, she was rushed to the hospital where they needed to do emergency surgery on her back, and after being put on anesthetic, she was in a state of awakeness. Now she looks and she ends up on this beautiful hillside with flowers and many mountains, and immediately she thinks, well, this is a cool hallucination. Then she feels a sense of peace and warmth. Now, wondering where she was, there was a thought telepathically communicating into her head. This is your home, and you are part of me, and you are part of us. Now, realizing that she was in heaven, she realizes that whatever she was doing on earth was just a temporary state and that it was no longer important to her. Now, out of this fog, there was a being with long hair with no human-like form, and this form was vaguely feminine. And that being said, it said, please take what you can learn so you can go back to live a better life worth living. Now, Nancy then replies, are you kidding me? I'm not going back to that place called Earth. This is so much peaceful here. The being then replied, well, you have already agreed to go back. All of a sudden, Nancy said no. She didn't remember that this was going on. Now, the being then showed her a life review of the moment where she did agree to begin life on Earth. Now, as this was going on, Nancy noticed that behind her back was black fog that materialized in back of her. Now, as she looked to the front, she could see the peaceful forest that she was in, and being confused, she asked the being why there was black fog that was behind her, but she was able to see only in front of her. Now, the being said that this was a temporary place of holding where she could comfortably learn before she goes back to her body. And it was a place of comfort and not the actual place of where she is really supposed to go, and that is heaven. So then she was taken to a beautiful pond, and Nancy noticed on the surface that there were videos of her life in this air pocket. Now, when Nancy clicked the air pocket, she was reliving the scene, but this time feeling the emotions of people in her life that she interacted with.
And I just sat back on kind of on my heels and just watched the surface. The ripples going out, I could see on top of the ripples, there were small little pockets all across the surface of the pond that to me looked like little videos, vignettes of specific moments in my physical life. But when I would focus on one, I was back in it. It wasn't like I was watching it from outside. I was back in it, experiencing it again from my perspective, but also experiencing it from the other people. And I could feel everything they felt as if it was mine. And that really got to me, because there were times when I helped someone or said something nice, and I could feel that person's, for want of a better term, I could feel their spirit soar. I could feel how buoyant they felt because someone said something kind. And then it also, I could see the downstream effects of those actions too. So if I said something positive and uplifting to someone, I in turn saw how that allowed them to be more positive with other people. So this teaching was, you have an impact on the people around you, not just physically, but there's also an energetic or spiritual component to every interaction that you have, whether it's a verbal interaction, whether there's something non-spoken, it doesn't matter. Everything that you do has an impact, and therefore be more conscious of how you impact others. On the flip side, so it was balanced out for me to learn from with things that weren't so great that I did. There was a time when I was a teenager and my younger sister and I got into a fight. We fought like cats and dogs when I was a kid. We just did not see eye to eye. And I loved her, but we didn't get along very well. And there was one point when I think I was probably like 17 and she was 14. I said something not so kind to her. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. It was just a way to get her off my back. You know, I was really tired of the fight we were having, so I just said something stupid and not very nice. And she didn't react. You know, I didn't see any reaction in the moment for her except she left. But in my review, I could feel the hurt that I caused her in that moment. And this is the second thing that always gets me. When I felt her pain at what I said to her, that was the biggest teaching moment ever.
Now, as you can tell by that quick video, you could tell that some of it was pain and happiness. Now, the being told her that in life we have an effect on people's actions based on what we say or do. Now, this was so intense for Nancy that she becomes emotional and decides to change her ways and how she treats people. After that learning process, Nancy is sent back to her body and recovers. Now, doctors would estimate that she would heal within 16 weeks, where in fact her recovery was a lot quicker, which would be 4 weeks instead. Now, Nancy is now a changed woman and lives her life with risks and to the fullest understanding that there is a place that we go when we die. But the next story is a lot more scary. It's not so good. And this is called the Brian Melvin story. In 1988, young Brian was a construction worker, and he was born an atheist and was a party animal with friends. Now, one of his workers brought in some water from Mexico that was contaminated with bacteria. Now, Brian ended up drinking it by accident, and within the next 72 hours, Brian would fall severely sick at home and fall to the floor with dehydration and would pass away. After he dies, Brian immediately hovers over his body and passes through the ceiling into this dark place. Now, while being encompassed into this realm, he smells a tremendous odor, like somebody farted. Everybody plays sometimes. See, we call it rotten eggs and sulfur, and anyway, that's not the point. Anyway, the point is, right, he notices how hot it is and the screams of agony echoing in the background. Now, right in front of him are what were said to be half reptilian and half dinosaur-looking creatures, and tormenting these souls with vicious growls. Now, Brian was greeted by a small reptilian creature in a hoodie, speaking broken English mixed with tongue language. Now, the creature said, "Thou granted permission to see with their own eyes of what not being in the kingdom of heaven looks like." So Brian was shown in this realm old souls and new souls being punished. When Brian was following this creature, he says there were cubicles about the size of a small room, all stacked up from another. Now, in this cubicle, there were souls reliving their wickedness, that they had done, what they had done on earth, into the most brutal punishment put upon them. Now, in one cubicle, he could see a woman who died during the 9th century, who would torment babies and kill them for pleasure. Now, Brian was able to witness the woman getting revenge for what she did by these entities that were torturing her by ripping her skin off to the bone till she was a skeleton. Now, after she was a skeleton, the flesh would formulate back into her normal self, and the torture process would happen all over again. Now, there was another incident about this, where in this vision that he was seeing, there was a man from the 1500s who would torture his crewmates for fun by smacking them or killing them on the ship. Now, all of a sudden, he sees a man trapped in a casket in his cubicle and breaking free. Now, these entities would jump into the casket where this man had break free and would attack him, and screams would be heard non-stop. But this one gets a little bit more chilling, and this one in particular is a man that we would recognize to be well known as the most evil man on earth. And I'll give you a hint. It's a man with a famous mustache who killed a lot of Jews in the concentration camps. Adolf Hitler. Check his testimony out.
He knows who it is. It's Adolf Hitler. Hitler was sitting in a cube. The cube was open, and it was just burning flames. He's just sitting there burning. And his flesh wasn't burning, and he had this hideous look on his face. And as he was burning, the flesh would be rotting, and he was feeling every bit of it. It was almost like every oven of the gas, of the concentration camps. All the tortures that went on there were being meted back to him in one intense flaming bit of stoked up white hot heat that would rot his flesh away at the same time, make him ashes, come back. He was just being tormented like that. He was just, I remember having this weird look on his eyes. It was just angry, vicious anger.
And after that experience, he sees this pink creature. Here's his account of what this could be. Could this have possibly be Lucifer, or formerly known as the devil? Check it out.
The person who was looking at this creature is one of those tall creatures with the faces that went around, but it was of a beautiful purplish color in a way, kind of a beautiful creature, but hideous at the same time. And with its faces revolving around, very seductive, very, very flattering, very, very persuasive. It would try to plant thoughts in your mind, trying to tell you, why would such a good God allow people to suffer like this? It was trying to get me to curse God. I really don't know who the demon creature was. I know he had great power and authority. He either was the second in command or he could have been Satan himself. This one vortex was spinning, and a lady that had just died in a car wreck came through, and she was deposited right there. And I saw her as she arrived, and inside her cube, she saw it as the illusion of her grandmother's farm, that her grandparents' farm that she loved so well as when she was growing up. And her grandmother recently passed away too, so she got in this cube, and immediately she thought she was in heaven because there was a grandmother waiting there welcoming her. The grandmother that was actually a demon that gave the illusion of being the grandmother said, "Dear Pudding, you made it to heaven. I'm so glad you're here." And she really thought that she was in paradise. But there was a darker side to her. She would make her children be what she wanted. Her children wanted something else. She wanted them to be this. And if they didn't do it her way, it was the fist. It was verbal abuse. It was cutting down. So as she sat down, I was watching it, and the tree's limbs just grabbed her. And then she realized she was not in paradise. And as we passed some cubes, there were people inside, and they were trapped in flames. And it was like their skin was still intact, but they were burning.
Scary. Now, when he realizes how scary this place was, he started thinking about Jesus. Now, these evil beings were taunting Brian, claiming that nobody was going to save him, until a hand reached out to Brian, and Brian felt a magnificent peace with his hand lifting up. Now, Brian was told, which he believed was God and Jesus, that he was granted a second chance, and that his work for mankind was not done, and that he needed to go back to his body. Now, Brian did, and so he recovered in the hospital, never forgetting the vision, transforming his religion into Catholic and Christianity. Now, here's another story about a woman who passed and came back, and it's called 11 Minutes in Heaven. Now, this is involving by a woman by the name of Charlotte Holmes, who in 2019 recalls seeing her lifeless body on the operating table with doctors working on her chest to save her life. Now, she had high blood pressure that caused her to have a stroke. Now, when she died, she could see her husband Danny right by her bedside, all nervous. Now, at this moment, Charlotte begins to smell the most beautiful flowers and hears music that resonates with her soul. Now, when she opened up her eyes, she knew she was in heaven, and she described the scene as beautiful trees and flowers swaying with motion of joy. And this was an indescribable joy radiated to her in her soul. Next, all of a sudden, she sees her mom and her dad and her sister. Now, when she saw her family members, she noticed that they were youthful than the age that they died at, and they just looked so young and healthy in their 30s. And right behind them, there was a light that manifested, and the light was so bright, she could not see the figure that was behind it. Now, immediately, Charlotte knew it was God. Next, she sees a toddler running through the bushes. Confused, she immediately asks God who this baby is. And then all of a sudden, she hears, "This is your child that died prematurely at birth many years ago." Now, Charlotte immediately realizes that it was the stillborn son that died while she was young. Now, she asked God, how was that possible if he didn't get to experience life? And God told her that babies that die very young end up growing in heaven, and that there is no time, and that it is for eternity. So 48 years after Charlotte had the baby was still a toddler. Now, the last and final thing that Charlotte saw from God was this very dark place with the smell of rotten flesh and screams. Now, she believed that this was hell. After seeing the vision of heaven and hell, the contrast between the two seemed unbearable. And this is what she said that God told her.
Then, God chose to show her one more thing.
God took me to the edge of hell, and I looked down, and the smell, and then rotten flesh, that's what it smelled like, and screams. After seeing the beauty of heaven, the contrast to seeing hell is almost unbearable. And he says, I show you this to tell you, if some of them do not change their ways, this is where they shall reside. I heard my father say, you have time to go back and share.
As quickly as she had gone to heaven, Charlotte's spirit came back.
I felt myself being drawn into my body. I felt the pain.
Ever since that experience, Charlotte is a believer now of life after death, and has become aware that heaven is not just a made-up place of fairy tales, that it's real. And ever since then, she's been sharing her near-death experience story. Now, this next story is about it's not necessarily a near-death experience story, but this is about an artist who has claimed to have seen visions of heaven and dedicates their life through drawings of what this place is said to look like. Now, be buckled on about what I'm about to tell you, because this girl is about my age. She's about 20, a little older than me, 29 years old. And she started painting since she was 4 years old. Now, it's very incredible that these paintings were made by her at a very young age, especially being very young, with usually at that age an average human not being able to draw like this. And this is the name of the artist, by the name of Akiane Kramaric. Now, she was born on July 9th, 1994, and she's an American poet and painter. Now, she began drawing at the age of 4, and Kramaric's best-known painting, which was called Prince of Peace, and she completed at the age of 8. Now, of course, she was born to a Lithuanian mother and a non-practicing Catholic American father, and Kramaric professed that she saw the face of Jesus Christ in her visions. Now, Kramaric is a self-taught painter, and she says that Jesus spoke to her when she was 4 years old, encouraging her to draw and paint her visions. And she began to draw at the age of 4, and was painting at 6, and began to write poetry at 7. Now, at the age of 8 years old, Akiane painted Jesus, and her first completed self-portrait sold for $10,000. Now, her paintings are basically about children and Jesus and animals, and it's about love in these paintings. But I'm going to tell you that this painting, she's done over 200 artworks and 800 literary works, and published 2 best-selling books. But I'm going to tell you, this is a very interesting painting. Now, I want you to look at these paintings. The first one I'm going to show you is Jesus. She painted this as a child. Look how in depth, and look how well symmetrical this picture is. It's like somebody older than her, like in their 30s, painted it. How can a child that young paint a picture like this? I'm telling you, it's powerful to the mind. It's interesting. So, the interesting thing, though, about this image, though, of Jesus is that people that have even had near-death experiences that she personally knew, that have claimed to have met Jesus, the majority of them say that this is indeed what he looks like. Now, look at the image in the face. There is a sense of peace while you look at this image, and the gentle eyes that are staring right to your soul. Now, the next painting was painted by Kramaric when she was 12 years old, and this was a vision of what heaven looks like translating into earthly language. And this gives you an idea on how vibrant these colors are. And notice the white light that radiates with the green grass and light. Now, people that have had near-death experiences always report how colorful heaven is. And everything is more vibrant, and these paintings do not highlight the true identity of it. But it is according to a lot of near-death experiences that it is very indescribable to the human language, and this is the closest that you can possibly get. Now, again, it's just so talented that a child that young can paint so extraordinary and professional like this. And what normal 7 to 12-year-old paints these paintings with excellence. Now, there's another picture that this one is about. This looks like a very angelic being with rainbows running through her hair. And it's so angelic. Now look at the many color rainbows in the picture with this giant. It's just beautiful. And this is all coming from her head. And this is all coming from like the visions that she's claiming to get from Jesus, and also visions from the other side of what's there. And whatever the case may be, if you all don't believe in it, I respect it. And I will tell you this. Either way, if you're looking at these pictures, it highlights one true thing. That where we go, wherever we die, because energy cannot be created nor destroyed, we go to a very beautiful place that is so indescribable and very similar to Earth, but more vibrant and more peaceful and loving. Now, these stories all have an interesting meaning, the amount of peace and comfort that radiates within these stories, and the reason for why some of these people return to their bodies. Now, they have more work to do, is what they're constantly told to by God for telling them that it's not their time yet. But the question is, what is the work that they need to accomplish, right? So, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope to bring these stories to the table about this. And remember, please like and subscribe to this channel, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Alright everybody, have a great day.